Bowers & Wilkins just released the PI5 S2 and PI7 S2, but today we'll be focusing on the PI5. What improvements do we see with the PI5 S2 from the original S1? Firstly, the buds see an extra hour of playback battery life, now 5 hours instead of the 4 that we saw in the S1. Connectivity has also been improved in both strength and distance. Dropouts were a common enough issue reported with the first generation, making this a very welcome improvement. Also seeing an upgrade is the Bowers & Wilkins app, where you can centralize your streaming subscriptions, as well as control ANC and pass-through modes, and check your bud's battery status. Finally, some new pastel colors are being offered. These are Storm Gray, Cloud Gray, and Spring Lilac, which is the color of the unit I used for this review. Some of the best things have stayed the same, such as the 9.2 dynamic driver, the small ergonomic fit, the semi-open back design, if that's what you can call this, and the tuning. Now, let's take a look inside of the box. You get your PI5 S2 wireless buds and charging case, a user guide and safety manual, 3 pairs of silicone tips in total, and a charging cable. Let's get into some of the wireless features first, and with that we'll go over some of the changes and improvements that were made. The battery capacity of the buds is one of the most significant upgrades that's been made with the PI5 S2 versus the S1. The S1 had 4 hours of playback at 50% volume, and the new S2 buds have 5 hours at 50% volume, another 19 in the case, so that's almost another 4 charges that are held in the case. So 25% increase, that's pretty significant. That puts the PI5 from going, I would say, below average to being on the low end of average, but still within that reasonable range. So does the S2 have ANC? Well, I would hope so, because the S1 also had ANC. The ANC is pretty solid quality. I sit next to a central air unit in the office, and these basically reduced that kind of loud, low-pitched roar to a very, very mild background noise. I would say that, high-frequency sounds like keyboard typing or something like that, you still hear it pretty easily, which I think is pretty normal for ANC. But yeah, I was very happy with the noise canceling that I got with these. I was also pretty happy with transparency mode with these. If you use the app, you can choose between low and high. Low mode just takes the outside noise, puts it into your ears at a lower volume. High, as you can imagine, puts it in at a higher volume. I found that low was, more of my preference. I think that high things started to sound a little more harsh and less realistic. Low mode, though, I thought it was pretty good mic quality. I thought it was pretty realistic. Mic quality when it comes to calls wasn't fantastic. Also wasn't too bad either. It seemed to bring out a little more of a lower quality in voices. Also, there was just a little bit of that, crunchy phone tone present in a voice. But it's not like it was difficult to understand what somebody was saying. It was clear enough. Wasn't bad, just wasn't great. I also thought that for the most part, connectivity was really good with these. I know that was a problem with the PI5 S1, which I'll come back around to that. But yeah, I thought that these were pretty easy to connect with. The only real issue is that the buds connect to your phone's Bluetooth and the Bowers & Wilkins app separately. And there were a handful of times where, music was still playing through the buds, so they were still connected to my phone, but they would lose connection to the app. And then when I would go to hit reconnect on the app, there was a bit of garbled audio, and then they would reconnect and things were back to normal. You don't need to be connected to the app to listen to music with these. Mostly I was just connecting so that I could, turn ANC on and off, or shuffle through, the different pass-through modes, which for the most part can be done with smart controls. So basically you can get away without using the app. There was some extra work that went into the app this time versus the app that went with the S1. Now it seems like you can stream from other services through the app, so you can kind of have everything centralized in the Bowers and Wilkins app. So yeah, that's a cool, more minor additional upgrade. Moving on to the other upgrades that we're seeing in the S2, Bowers and Wilkins also improved the Bluetooth antenna on these. They self-report that it adds an extra 25 meters to the Buds range, and I didn't test that directly to see, just how far it went, but I did find that the connectivity with these was pretty impressive, especially compared to the S1. In a stable office environment, I experienced just really, really brief cutouts that weren't such an issue. And that's honestly kind of standard, when I'm testing wireless earbuds. So no, not a serious complaint with that. And then when I was outside on a busy street, I experienced, a little more of a cutout and like skipping sort of phenomenon, but I think that it still performed better than most buds that I take on this test, and definitely performed better than the S1. Now, I guess to segue into how these look and how they feel, the final change that I haven't mentioned yet to the PI5 S2 is that there are some new colors that are being rolled out, some more like pastel colors. And that about sums up the differences between the S1 and S2. So to recap those, you have better, stronger connectivity, and a whole extra hour of battery life in the buds, and also a new color scheme. Those seem to be the main improvements that have gotten made. So it's not going to be an audible difference. These basically sound the same. I think, though, that these improvements are still very worthwhile, and I respect them a lot. They just are shoring up the PI5 to be just a more all-around, solid, well-performing wireless earbud. And they're not doing that through any gimmick or through anything that's too easy to do. There are legitimate, technical changes taking place with like the battery life and the Wi-Fi, for example, and also the color scheme, which is nice. The new colors are nice. Just letting you know, that is basically the extent of the changes that we're seeing. So getting back to how these look and how they feel. Bowers and Wilkins is a British company, but something that I really like about their designs, there's something kind of like Swedish about the design. It's like the muted sort of now pastel color schemes, and then you have some of these like modern metallic details on it. Also, the Bowers and Wilkins font, that's kind of plainly stated, but also kind of elegant and tasteful. I get specifically kind of like Swedish design vibes from these, and I like that a lot. They look plain, but they also look cool, and that's nice. So fit-wise, as you can probably tell already, these are absolutely no different from the S1, and that I think is a very good thing, because I love the fit on these. I think that these are a very, very easy fit. You can kind of hold it by this metal knob. It's kind of inviting you to do that, and put it in vertically, twist it back, and it's in. And you have a pretty nice isolating design. So big fan of the comfort, big fan of how they look. Something that was immediately apparent to me when I started listening to these was how unusually good the imaging and soundstage is for a wireless unit. Yes, it's wide. It has like a nice width to it, but more than anything, what really impressed me with it was how deep it went. I really got a nice sense of distance from parts. More subtle parts kind of had this angular quality that felt as if they were further away from my face. There's a really nice bass response on this with a really nice punchy bass slam that I felt in the back of my head. It was genuinely entertaining imaging. Like it really added to the listening experience. It wasn't just that it was accurate, that it could reproduce three-dimensional qualities. It was that it actually had like vivid three-dimensional qualities. So I give a lot of props to any wireless unit that is currently pulling that off. I feel like if you can pull off really nice imaging, kind of puts you in that higher wireless league, which I definitely think the PI5 S2 is in. So moving on to balance, the PI5 definitely has a dominant low end. I think that is the defining feature of its balance. It's not just a loud low end, but it's also a widely boosted low end. Subs are loud, mid bass is loud, It rolls off in the high bass, but the high bass is still getting a bit boosted, and even low mids are getting a bit boosted. So having a lot of high bass and having a lot of low mids in your sound signature, I feel like you're really walking a very fine line between a genuinely warm sound signature and having a very pillowy and muddy sound signature. I think that the PI5 S2 walks on the right side of that line and imparts like a genuine warmth that doesn't lose too much detail. It doesn't make things too pillowy. And I think that this low end is really, really well suited for like pop music, electronic music, more mainstream music. You know, kind of took bass and kick drums and kind of like glued them together and also reinforced both of them, and gave the low end its own distinct, like really forceful sort of texture with, you know, all the low end parts like reinforcing one another. So yeah, a really nice low end drive on these. As far as, you know, center frequency balance goes, like I mentioned earlier, the low mids are basically a continuation of what the high bass is doing, which is rolling off from some, you know, heavily boosted subs and mid bass. So it is a low mid emphasis in the center frequency profile, but again, it doesn't really lose clarity here. It's kind of serving the same function that the high bass is serving. So, you know, vocals, they had a bit of emphasis on like the lower humming fundamental, but it wasn't too much. It kind of softened them and made them a little more intimate than, you know, like making them muffled or like unclear or anything like that. It also gets balanced out very well by, I think, a pretty drastic ramping up that happens in the high mids. So it's like, to use vocals as an example again, you do hear that kind of softer, more humming fundamental, but then the more like driving overtones that are in the high mids are getting brought up as well. I think the only minor complaint of the PI5's like high bass and low mids is that when I was listening to more like aggressively strummed acoustic guitars, you know, like Fleet Foxes, for example, I thought it overemphasized those like deeper humming fundamentals in acoustic guitars a little too much. They kind of overpowered the like center mid overtones of the guitar. But that kind of feeds back into what I was saying, where it's like, you know, listening to more electronic music or pop music and just literally popular music with these, it's a balance that's much more geared towards that, and I think really enhances those genres. So might not be right if you're listening to, you know, more acoustic, like folksier sort of music, but I do think that these are in general being geared towards that more mainstream general audience. I have a bit more to say about that. I'll come back to that. And then finally, treble balance, I think, is very nice on these. I think that there's an adequate amount of extension. There was a good amount of like vocal air that I heard on these, so it's a really detailed high end. And that sits in a really nice contrast against like the warmth that you're hearing in the low mids and the high bass, and even, you know, the deeper drive that you hear in like the mid bass and the subs. So there's that really aggressive sort of low end that's being coupled with this like airier, more revealing and lifting high end. And I think that those two just work really well together. I think that more of the focus with the PI5 S2 is in like low and mid treble. So, you know, like I think that the overtones in electric guitars had a little like extra biting quality to them. It is a pretty forward treble profile that balances out those really dense lows, but it doesn't risk running harsh. And I think it's a near perfect balance to those lows. So a little summary of what we just talked about. The S2 has improvements over the S1 of the PI5 in the sense that it's now 5 hours of battery in the buds instead of 4. There's a better connection that seems just generally stronger and has more range to it. And also, you know, there's a nice little color scheme update. When it comes to look and feel, I think Bowers and Wilkins did a really excellent job. I think if you're trying to make an earbud that you want to see mass adoption with, this is a great design for it. It's very comfortable, it's very simple, it's not overstated, it still looks cool. Then imaging, soundstage, I think that those are some of the stars of the show. I'm really impressed with the soundstage on these. And then when it comes to balance, it's a really low end, heavy balance, heavy on the subs, heavy on the mid bass. Doesn't shy away from the high bass and the low mids, but also doesn't overemphasize them either. Not losing detail, just adding some warmth, I think. Mids profile, a bit V-shaped, but they pull it off, they do it well. And then just a nice, pretty tasteful, and also impressive treble profile for a wireless unit, where the extension, I think, is pretty decent. Sits really well with, vocal air, and provides some lift to this otherwise really dense sort of sound character. And overall, I feel like with the PI5 S2, it's like there's a bigger picture at stake where, yes, it's really high quality audio, but it's more than that. It's not just a wireless earbud that is catering to a niche of audiophiles. Nothing against that. There is a place for that, and I like a lot of those sort of wireless earbuds. I reviewed some of them recently. But what I really like about the PI5 is that it's kind of seems like it's going for the crown. Like when you look at this, you can see how it's competing with Apple. And I don't think it's shy about trying to do that. It's in a similar-ish sort of price range to the AirPods. I think offers a much more compelling soundstage, much better imaging, and to my ears, I think a better balance as well. A more just engaging sound overall. They look like something that could be, adopted mainstream. They feel like something that most people would just find very simply comfortable. And now with, the wireless improvements, the battery improvements, they have, just very solid technical performance as well, beyond just the sound quality and the comfort. So that's why I have particular respect, I think, for the PI5 S2. It's trying to be the best. It is, I think, clearly trying to go for a more mass adoption. And in my opinion, there's no reason that I can't pull it off. I think they're great for both audiophiles or, just people who like to nitpick with their sound quality. I think they're good for those people. And I also think that they're really excellent for the general listener. I think that they're a perfect halfway point between both of those things, and just overall a very well-rounded product that was really enjoyable to use. I'm gonna have the PI7 S2 review up pretty shortly. I'll make some comparisons with the PI5 S2 with it as well, so stay posted on that. But until then, I'm gonna put a link to the PI5 S2 from the Audio 46 store down below. If you use code Chris10 at checkout, you can get 10% off an order from Audio 46 and also help support the channel. And if you want to see more videos or reviews like this, remember to like and subscribe below. So anyway, I'll see you next time. PI7 S2 coming soon.